Hey people, it's me again, Caroline. Have you ever heard the story of the boy who cried wolf? It's a classic. A young village shepherd boy, like so many children his age, wanted to be the center of attention, so he decided to run down to the village and cry out, "Wolf! Wolf! Wolf!" Well, this of course motivated some of the villagers to grab up their weapons, while others went from their work in the fields with their children back to the safety of their homes, only to find out the boy was lying. Well, the boy did this again the next day, and the next day, and again the day after that, and the villagers became quite upset with the boy. So the time came when there was a real wolf, and he called out again, "Wolf! Wolf! Wolf!" But the villagers didn't believe him this time, and, well, tragic events followed for the poor village. The moral of the story, of course, is that you shouldn't lie, because if you do, when you are actually telling the truth, no one will believe you. This is an age-old story often told to children to teach them the problem with lying. Okay, I know, that's all kid stuff though, right? But imagine if the lies weren't about a wolf, but were instead about an attack, or a disease, or a war. And instead of the lie being spread by a little shepherd boy, it is instead spread by a news source. Well, unfortunately, this happens all the time. What problems can this create? How often does this actually happen? Well, these are some of the questions we will be exploring today. Today, we will analyze the ways the media shapes policy through influencing public awareness, discussion, and opinion. The essential question for today is, how does the media influence and shape public awareness, discussion, opinion, and thus help to shape the policies possible in society? Let's get started. In the last lesson, we covered the commercialization of the media. Pretty scary stuff. And I promise, it ain't fake news, friends. The digital revolution has accelerated the consolidation of media, and this has led to the lower journalistic standards, in turn adding to the manufactured amplification of disinformation. So, why does this matter? Well, as we established further back in the course, a free and independent press establishes a greater degree of public awareness, as well as a greater amount of possible policy solutions. Let's dive into the first section and explore further. Imagine if the shepherd and the boy who cried wolf story didn't exist at all. No one would ever know the wolf was coming. Awareness is key to solving problems. Truly, a vibrant, independent, and competitive press generates higher degrees of public awareness around a greater number of issues. These, in turn, force candidates running for elections to address these issues. Let's see how this worked in the past. Due to high professional standards, journalists during the mid-20th century acted as watchdogs, and investigative journalism became an important function of the press, which increased public awareness. One example of the power of the media is when one story led all the way up to the Oval Office with the Watergate case of Richard Nixon. Watergate refers to a series of connected scandals that involved a break-in of the Democratic National Committee's offices in an attempt to surveil the Democratic Party. 5 burglars were literally caught in the act. And guess what? 4 out of the 5 burglars were ex-CIA, and the 5th? He was the security chief of the committee to re-elect President Nixon. Not a good look, Chief. Different actors attempted to cover Watergate up, including the president himself, as was revealed by the press with the release of the famous Nixon tapes, in which he was recorded directing the FBI to pull back on the case. 2 reporters in the Washington Post continued to pursue the story, being fed by the confidential source known as Deep Throat. The story changed the perception of the presidential office and helped lead to numerous reforms designed to limit presidential power, such as the Wars Power Act and limits to campaign financing. Pretty crazy stuff, right? What if the press never reported on it? On the flip side, with highly commercialized media, you get fewer and fewer media outlets, less reporters, and degraded journalistic standards. This lack of outlets reduces public awareness of issues. Loss of local and international media outlets create a vacuum for soft news and disinformation that redirects and distorts public discussion. A study done in 2010 found that 80% of stories examined were not original reporting, but rather were repackaged stories. Finally, the commercialization and the consolidation of media creates apathy, meaning people just stop believing they can ever really know what's going on, so they stop looking at the news. Just like the village people and the boy who cried wolf. If the truth does show up on the news, people become less likely to listen. Time for a show what you know. How does the media shape public awareness of issues and policies? You know, some say talk is cheap. And while that may be true, in this case, the cost of not talking is very, very steep. Public awareness forms the topics and talking points of political discussion, and the result of these discussions becomes public opinion. If the media is corrupt and putting out false news, then public opinion isn't based on facts, but on falsehoods. That's not good. Professional codes for journalism create standards for the media that must be followed across the board, yet they do not diminish viewpoints. Instead, diverse viewpoints compete within the public discussion over the meaning of accepted facts and shared values. These undeniable truths help to stabilize the social fabric of society by creating more participation in civil discussion, though this is not always the case. There are other great benefits that come with a diverse news landscape. One is the access to numerous reliable news sources. This selection allows for greater democratic participation in the discourse. An aware public can help mediate the tension between media and government, helping to ensure more democratic outcomes. But, on the other hand, with a highly commercialized media, the accumulation of profit becomes central to media processes and outcomes. And, as technologies shift and challenge that profit, journalistic standards deteriorate due to cutting costs. This focus on the bottom line reduces quality journalism and diminishes the variety of issues available to the public discussion, despite the increased access to information the internet promises. So, why do commercial interests continue to unite and control the media? Well, the media is a powerful tool for business, plain and simple. Think about it. You see a news story that talks about how a rare residue on the outside of fruits and vegetables is causing illness all around the nation. How scary! Do we throw away all our produce? Suddenly, on the commercial break, you see a commercial for a spray which removes harmful residues on the outside of fruits and vegetables. Wow, how convenient! Also, not a coincidence. Using the front of news to cause immediate demand for products and services is powerful. And what's worse is that news that should be covered sometimes gets passed over due to the lack of its marketability. The effect here is that what gets chosen for the news is safe. Safe for those who control the news, and what's chosen does not easily upset the distribution of power over policy creation. For example, a pharmaceutical ad is not going to be associated with a cause related to the opioid crisis. It's too self-incriminating and would result in profit loss. But wouldn't that be pretty important news to know? See how this causes problems? When profit is considered more important than integrity, news agencies, in order to cut costs, rely mostly on official sources, such as government and corporate press releases. This is another problem. A Pew Center report found that in many stories in the last few decades, up to 86% of sources in quote-unquote original reporting were from official sources, such as corporate press releases and oftentimes word for word. When the only sources come from the government itself, it dramatically alters the public discourse towards the official version of events, which in turn negatively impacts the diversity of public opinion and possible policy solutions. With that, it's time for a show what you know. How does the media shape public discussion of issues and policies? Investing in a free and competitive press generates an aware and active public that then participates in elections at higher rates. For example, between the 1830s and the 1880s, there was a 60 and 70% voter turnout in midterm elections and up to 80% in presidential elections. But a highly commercialized media and a lack of professional journalism can diminish public awareness, distort the public discussion, and impede or manipulate public opinion. As financial interests amass behind the scenes, news stories are given different slants or omitted altogether in order to appease sponsors. This promotes the bubble effect discussed in the previous lesson. Beyond maintaining the corporate and private interests, commercialized news agencies may also need to promote government-friendly stories in order to secure access to official sources. Talk about a conflict of interests. These news guys are supposed to be critical of what the government does, and a conflict of interest like this is what contributes to a lack of political participation. For example, voter turnout began to decline around 1890 after the initial wave of consolidation in print media, and went from 80% in presidential elections to just 50% by 1925. After turnout went back up during the Depression, World War II, and post-World War II era, it began to decline again in the late 1960s, which correlates to further consolidation of all media. Less turnout means public opinion has less control over public policy. And on the flip side, it means greater control by private and political interests. It's important for us to step back and remember something we learned at the very beginning of this course: authoritarianism. Whether fascist or communist, authoritarian governments rely on control of the media as an essential tool for controlling the public. The goal is to secure public opinion for the authoritarian state. Disinformation creates the context for both a lack of public interest in politics as well as public opinion that blindly supports the official narrative, or the big lie. So where can this disinfo come from? Well, in the digital realm, where there are very low levels of journalistic integrity, disinformation steps in from numerous sources. For example, Facebook, or Meta, refers to this disinformation as coordinated inauthentic behavior. Now, this phrase is used to refer to a coordinated disinformation campaign by organizations and states, campaigns that create other groups or individuals that then pose as media outlets, civic groups, and independent journalists. These artificial groups and individuals are designed to influence elections and policy around the world. With that, it is time to answer the essential question. It was, how does the media influence and shape public awareness, discussion, opinion, and thus help to shape the policies possible in society? You got this. Now go for it. Time for a recap. Today we learned that a free press is the cornerstone for the promotion of an enlarged public awareness that creates robust public discussion. This discussion, in turn, fosters strong public opinion capable of influencing policy. We learned that a highly commercialized press tends to reduce public awareness and distort public discussion in order to control public opinion. This just in, the lesson is over. Next time we will dig deeper into disinformation and provide you with the tools to identify it and not spread it. But that's for next time. Have a great day, and remember, vote, debate, and participate. Hey, hey.